Hey everyone, what's up? My name is Moeez and I am one of the hosts of this BFCM Prepathon. And today I bring you a very special session. This session is all about web security. Now, today's theme is web optimization, which means that all the sessions that we will be doing today will be around making sure that your website is properly optimized, whether it's performance, speed, UI, UX, you name it. So today's session um, is about web security, and to bring that to us, we have not one, not two, but four panelists. And obviously, they don't need any introduction. But as a host, I'm obliged and honored to introduce them to you. So the first host, so the first guest of this session is Akshat Chaudhary. He is the CEO of Blogvault. And
And the second,
the second guest of this session is Kathy Zant. Obviously, you must have
obviously,
seen
you
her in
have
different
your
WordCamps.
podcast.
The third
The third,
panel panelist is Miriam Schwab. Can we have
can
Miriam
we
on
have?
the stage? Perfect. And the fourth is Peshev, who's a bit late, but we will add him in the middle of the session. So I'm joined also by Oliver, who is my co-host for today. Hey Oliver, how are you?
Hello, Mohammed. I'm good. And hello, everyone who is watching. My name is Oliver, and I'm a developer relations contractor at DigitalOcean. My work there
Mhm.
focuses on the open source credit program and also the Hacktoberfest program, which developers have been contributing to open source within the month of October. So those are the work that I do at DigitalOcean. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Oliver, for co-hosting this session with me. So before we start off with this session, I want to encourage all the viewers who are watching this session to please interact in the chat. Make sure that you ask questions from our guest speakers because we have a leaderboard, which means that the most engaging viewer will get amazing prizes at the end of this event. So make sure that you are engaging in the chat, you're asking questions from our guests, and you're attending all the sessions. So I think we should start off with the session. We have a lot of questions to ask from this panelist. Obviously, all of them have a ton of experience when it comes to web security and a very diverse experience as well. So I think we should start off with the first question. Oliver, can you do the honors and start off this session with the first question?
Okay. So today we all know the panel question or the topic for today's discussion, and our first question will be: how would you define a digital fortress in the context of WordPress website, and why is it pivotal for businesses, especially in during high traffic periods like Black Friday and Cyber Monday, which is happening soon?
Yeah, I think I want to start off this question with Akshat.
Yeah, all right. Hi, everyone. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me. Hi, Miriam. Hi, Kathy. And hi, Oliver. Uh, so, yeah, a digital fortress, uh, at least the way I define digital fortress is security is so important for everything we do, right? And especially if you're running a website or an e-commerce store, even further specifically, you're dealing with so much important and critical data. So and you're running such a complex application. So it is on us to ensure that as the person hosting and running these applications to ensure that you secure every aspect of that data that you're hosting and your customers are trusting you with. And that's the way we would define it because of the criticality of that data, you need to secure it in the most comprehensive manner. Uh,
Awesome. Yeah, Kathy, if you want to go next, if you have anything to add.
Yeah. Well, the more successful your shop is online or the more successful your business is, the more valuable that asset is to protect. So, a lot of people say, "Oh, my store is insignificant. I only get a few orders here and there. It's not that big of a deal." So they sometimes overlook security or downplay it or don't think it's that big of a deal. But the sooner you start thinking about security and start thinking about that storefront as an asset to protect, the more you're going to take those proactive steps in order to protect it. And an event like this is just a perfect reminder of what you're here to do. You're here to go big or go home, right? So let's go big.
Yeah.
Let's create something that's of value and let's protect it.
Yeah, Miriam, do you have anything to add to this particular
Sure.
question?
So security is kind of like insurance in that you don't realize or understand that you need it until you need it. So it's something that's
Yeah.
very hard to encourage people to take seriously because everything is fine until it's not fine. So I think we all would strongly suggest to everyone, particularly around their campaigns around Black Friday, where every second that your site is up or not up makes a difference, right? Take the steps necessary to protect your site. And you use the word fortress. I would say the fortress has to do with a number of layers around your site, and just like on a very, very high level, make sure you're hosting with a high quality hosting provider, because you are not a security expert. So, as much as possible, put that in the hands of the people who are. And a lot of hosting providers today do take security seriously and take that responsibility on themselves to a certain extent. Obviously, make sure your site is always updated. Don't leave anything, don't be cheap with your licenses for plugins and not update them, because they will fit, and then you will pay a price. And finally, like another layer, which it's kind of important, but not like exactly security oriented, which is make sure your site is constantly being backed up. So if you're using your site for sales, like it's like a WooCommerce site or whatever, just have regular backups happening so you don't, in an unfortunate circumstance, lose any of that data related to purchases or whatever that you might be storing on your site, which, by the way, try not to store on your site. But if you are, then, just in general, make sure you have good, reliable backups. And with regards to backups in general, test them once in a while and make sure that they work. Like do a test restore.
Perfect. It's interesting, Miriam, that you mentioned WordPress, that you mentioned plugins, because we are speaking of WordPress specifically, and a lot of web security issues are rooted from plugins, especially in WordPress. So it's interesting that you mentioned plugins along with hosting and other factors that are specifically linked with the WordPress website. Moving on to the next question we have is, how can businesses prioritize effective WordPress security without incurring substantial cost? Now, the last part of this question is very important, because the theme of this event and what we are trying to do this year is make sure that people have proper websites, optimized websites without incurring too much cost. Because if you see, the worldwide trend is moving towards saving and making sure that they spend smartly, right? So taking that into context and making sure that people spend wisely, how do you think that people can ensure WordPress security? Because it can get a little costly sometimes. Miriam, do you want to start off?
Sure. So we're all fortunate to be in the world of WordPress, where actually, and from relative perspective, tools available to us are really low cost and very high quality. So, and if you think about the cost of implementing a proper security strategy versus not having it, and if your website in particular is very critical to you from a business perspective, then the cost would be much higher if you don't, right? So, there's great tools out there, and yeah, it might be a good idea to select a higher quality hosting provider that maybe costs a bit more, particularly around this type of activity. But in the end, it's the, cheap doesn't pay off so well and might cost more in the end. So, I'm a big fan of Akshat's products since like the beginning. So, they're really, really reasonably priced. How I feel about your products. So they're reasonably priced and they're very high quality. So, test those out. Of course, there's also WordFence in our industry, and other tooling around security, and then of course hosting providers, which I mentioned. So you can also have edge security on CDNs as another layer and things like that. So firewalls. basically like have a clue, be semi-educated enough a consumer, and try to choose tools that other like experts say to you, like these are good, so you don't have to learn everything from scratch. And yeah, so it will cost you, but again, it costs you more if you don't. In so many cases, you just don't want to go there, in my opinion.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you, Miriam. Kathy, do you have anything to add on making sure that we
Yeah.
have secure websites at a low cost?
Yeah, well, there's two things about security that are at the forefront. Information, meaning understanding when an intrusion is happening, or when an intrusion detection and intrusion prevention. Those are the two things that you need to put some focus on. And then also understanding your risk. You know, if your customer data gets exposed and that becomes a problem in your jurisdiction with the European Union or in various jurisdictions in the United States where customer information, personally identifiable information, a breach could, have some legal ramifications, the risk might be a lot higher. Pick tools that are going to help you with intrusion detection, intrusion prevention, give you the information that you need in order to make good security decisions, because it's really about, making sure that vulnerabilities are patched, making sure that no one can get in, that you have strong passwords, that you're using two-factor authentication. Some good knowledge is really going to help you make the good security decisions to protect your site. And there's a lot of tools out there that are free, that are low cost, Akshat's solutions, as well as a number that are freely available in the repository that you can use in order to inform yourself so that you can make those good decisions.
Yeah, Akshay, so I think we have talked a lot about your products. So if you want to, finish this question off with something that you want to add.
It's yeah, no, I don't want to talk about my product. And thank you, Kathy, Miriam. There are a lot of products out there, and there are a lot of excellent products in the WordPress ecosystem. That's the beauty of the WordPress ecosystem, that you can get so many good solutions to solve all of these problems. The question, actually, my answer to this whole thing would be slightly different. Is how can you have effective WordPress security? And for you, and I think the most important thing to understand is how do your sites get hacked. And unless you have that understanding, and that understanding is not very complicated, it appears like, oh yeah, that sounds like there's a lot of technology and uh, magic happening, or because sites getting hacked it appears very dangerous and some that kind of activity. But
Yeah.
there are very simple principles behind it, and once you understand how your sites get hacked, then you will realize that the right answers to solving them. Having a good hosting is super important, always, but you'll also realize that you know you can only rely on your hosting so much for security. So
Yeah.
again, all of these answers you get only once you understand it. The cheapest way to get good
All right.
security is to
Hi,
keep
Mari.
everything updated. I think that's the uh, um, hi Mario. Yeah, so keep everything updated. I think that is the cheapest single. It's time. It consumes time, but it's the most effective and the cheapest way to secure your site. So just keep everything updated. You've heard it a million times, and I'll just repeat that. That we can't repeat it enough times.
You're absolutely spot on, Akshat. So with that, I think we have our fourth panelist over here. We had some technical issues. We're sorry about that. Hey, Mario, how are you?
Hey everyone, sorry for being late. I've been struggling with some
It's all right.
issues. It's probably
Yeah, it's all right.
security penetration stuff from the Zoodle platform. So
Yeah,
that's my guess.
yeah. I think there was some issues regarding either the tool or something technical. So it's all right. You're here finally. So Mario, just to fill you in, we are well into our security panel. We have covered two questions. So regarding WordPress security, obviously. So moving on to our third question, which is kind of linked with our first question, which was, you can see it on your screen, how people can prioritize effective WordPress security, which are without incurring substantial cost. And we talked about some free plugins and things like that. So the next question is more or less like that, which is, can businesses rely on free options to safeguard their WordPress websites? I think a lot of people within the WordPress ecosystem, they start off with free tools and plugins and themes, but they don't move to the premium versions of it because they get too comfortable, and obviously they're saving cost. But How viable is that in today's world? I think I would let Mario start off this question.
Sure. So first off, I'd like to say that security is, something that becomes a problem the higher you scale. Meaning that the bigger the business, the bigger the brand, the bigger the store, the more traffic you get, the
Yeah.
more of a target you actually become. So I'd say that as far as small businesses and brands and kind of 5-page brochure websites are concerned, there's not much to worry about besides, sticking to the best security practices, like just keeping your website up to date, not use a dumb password, don't log in from a Starbucks or, airline Wi-Fi without having SSL on, and just some bare bones standard security practices. Now, at scale, it gets a little different, right? Because if you have a successful business, successful publishing website, a blog, a store, or show, you may actually face competition, especially now that Black
Yeah.
Friday, Cyber Monday is coming. It's a
Yeah.
realistic trouble. Moreover, the other challenge is that now with the holiday season coming up, most people are focused on making sales, closing deals, affiliates, performance, speed, and they have their radar actually off for the types of security issues that you may be facing, meaning that it's easier to get under the hood now that you're focused on something else. So that's why free options are good enough for pretty much everyone out there who's just starting out. And as you keep scaling, you definitely need to strengthen up all of your systems and keep an eye on all the vectors that may be problematic. More often than not, there are again 5 or 10 different things that happen more often than not,
Mm-hmm.
such as using XML RPC for DDoS attacks, or pure brute force for the login
Yeah.
pages, and not just the WP admin page, but the store login page, and a handful of these that free plugins are taking care of more better than not,
Yeah.
and just making sure that you use the right software, the right plugins that are securely coded and stuff, and everything is up to date, is going to solve really more than 90% of the issues. Everything else is just for the upper tier of using 100 not tested, random, off-the-shelf plugins, maybe some of them being WordPress websites, and scaling through the roof, and then wondering how people actually get you hacked.
Yeah. Miriam, do you want to add on uh, regarding free plugins? Obviously, since you're working with Elementor, I'm sure you must get a lot of people who are using free plugins along with Elementor. So, anything that you want to add?
So again, being in the WordPress space, there are some pretty good free plugins and solutions. If you want to save on that, then again, I'll go back to the hosting. Make sure that you're hosting with a high quality provider if you can. Also, if you're looking at free options, just make sure that they're being maintained, and that it looks like they're actively being used, and check that if so in the WordPress plugin repository, you can see when the last update was made. So it should be, let's say, in the last month. Let's say I'm just throwing out a number, but something like that. I will just mention a unique approach to security, which I'm very connected to. So I founded a company called Static, which was acquired by Elementor, and we publish WordPress websites as static. And once a WordPress site is published as static, you actually don't need any of these security solutions. The way that Static works, which is now an Elementor product, it's the WordPress site actually ceases to exist unless it's being used to update the site. In the static version, it has basically almost no attack surface. All of the things that make WordPress vulnerable are just not there because it's just a collection of static files. So just an FYI that is an approach that exists, not just with Static, with other products, and you can check it out if you want to just remove all of that from your head altogether.
Makes sense. That was awesome, Miriam. And I'm sure, Kathy, you must have worked with a lot of people who are using, or who tend to use or continue using free plugins. How do you think viable is it that people start using free plugins and then continue using them throughout their lives and not moving to the premium versions of it?
Yeah, I guess I'd just harken back to what I said before about, if you're going to go big, if you're going to create a store that's going to feed your family, that's going to be making money, then it's going to be something of value. Therefore, you're going to want to invest in protection of that income source, right? So it's a continuum, right? I mean, my shed in the backyard that has my lawnmower, if somebody breaks into it and steals my lawnmower, not that big of a deal. But if somebody breaks into my house and gets into, all the things I'm not going to tell you are super valuable, right? I secure those things in a much different way than the lawnmower. Don't really care about that so much. So, it's where does your digital home on the web fall in terms of the investment you need to make with security. If you're just getting started and funds are tight, there are plenty of free options in the repo that you can just install, and they have great tools that'll help you like start learning about security and the types of attacks that are coming at your site. However, as your site grows, as it grows in value, as you start having more interactions with more customers and you're protecting all that personally identifiable information in your customer database, then it becomes a valuable target for hackers and a valuable asset to you. So you're going to want to invest in it.
Makes sense. And I think, Akshat, you must have used free plugins sometime in your WordPress career. So what do you have to say about people using free plugins?
WordPress comes with so much free options and free stuff. And frankly, if you ask me, when it comes to security, assume that everything is vulnerable, free or paid. We have seen free plugins to be vulnerable. We have seen paid plugins to be vulnerable. Uh, I think free or paid does not matter when it comes to
Yeah.
vulnerability or security.
Okay.
Something which is developed well continuously. That is something like what Miriam said. I would echo that again, saying that look for things that are updated continuously, regularly, because you know that those plugins are being actively worked on. But a pro plugin is as likely to have a vulnerability as a free one. Uh, at least that's been our experience. The one other thing I will add is, in our experience, actually hackers, uh, and they're indiscriminate about, especially in the WordPress ecosystem, they're indiscriminate about the sites they're hacking. For them, it's about absolute numbers rather than specifics. If you are a very popular site, they might approach you in somewhat different manner, but just the fact that you have a lower value store or a not so popular store is not going to the fact that that exists is not going to protect you. You might take a slightly different approach, but at the end of it, when the damage is done, uh, you are still left to clean up the pieces, and that is a really, really painful uh, experience. So it is good to be prepared, whatever type of store that you have, because you have put in a lot of sweat into building that up.
Makes sense. Interesting take there, Akshat. So moving on to our next question, which is very interesting. I think Mario will be very interested in that question, because the question says that, should businesses handle their WordPress security in-house or consider outsourcing? Because there is a matter of trust in between, because I think the work that Mario does, he handles a lot of WordPress security for his clients. And, so Mario, what do you have to say? Do you want to like encourage people into making sure that they handle their web securities by outsourcing them, or is it better if they do it themselves?
I mean, I'd probably like to unite several things that were already said on the panel and some of the ideas in the chat as well that I've just been reading on, right? So
Yeah.
on the one hand, I'm going to echo Kathy in terms of, growing businesses and successful businesses and so forth. Like, it's something that you do for a living. It's your main, bread earner, and it's what you really care about, right? So, and I also give another example, right? I buy IKEA furniture for my, balcony that I'm using like twice a year. But when I go to a 5-star hotel, I expect the latest and greatest, or some Chinese Mandarin dynasty from the 17th century, some type of weird stuff, right? So there are different perceptions of whether you're doing something for fun, whether it's a business, and if it's a business, how large of a business it is. One example for that is marketing spend or sales spend, right? There are some averages that like 10% of a business budget is going to marketing, but 10% for $100,000 business is 10 grand, and 10% for a $10 billion business is $1 billion, right? So it's all about perception. Depending on whether you can afford or do in-house, it's going to really make a difference. Also, what Miriam mentioned, we've actually seen a lot of success with either headless websites or static websites, making sure that most of the issues actually don't exist, including some banking software that we have developed ourselves on top of WordPress. For the most part, it's running some pretty hardcore architecture. in specific, data server rooms owned by the bank with security guards on site, and then only having a separate designated site with 2 endpoints running to that specific system, right? There are only 2 vectors pulling very specific, very limited type of data to a very complex system pulling a lot of stuff. So it's almost impenetrable because it's an isolated with only 2 doors that are heavily guarded. It's much different than logging into a WordPress website connected to all of your CRMs and TRPs and marketing automation tools and everything and anything, and having 20 different admin users on that website. So having said that, and again, I'm also going to kind of recall some of the chat items. Some folks like Carlos mentioned reCAPTCHA, Rafal mentioned Cloudflare, regular updates, SEO, IP ban. All of these are legit, and they're becoming more and more and more prevalent and important the more you start scaling up. If you're just starting out, again, any free plugin like WordFence or so is going to do the job. The more you scale up, the more you need to pay attention to security, integrate web application firewall. Again, as Kathy said, IDS, IPS systems additionally, maybe get into Incapsula or Imperva, it's now called, and just scaling up. And once you get to a certain point, sure, you actually need to work with security professionals and make sure that everything is up to par. So it's really the difference between free, something for fun, a blog, a photography website or so, versus an important production-based system dealing with sensitive data.
Excellent answer, Mario, and makes sense. Completely telling that your experience with managing security outsource. Akshat, would you like to add on something to it really quickly, because we will be taking questions from the audience after this. So if we can, quickly go through
Yeah,
this
I'll just
question
keep it
and
quick.
start taking questions. Yeah.
Again, people like Mario are such experts, and I think any serious business should rely on security experts, even though they might, on the surface, it will appear that they're using a standard set of tools. But it is only when things really go wrong that you'll need their expertise comes in. And also, like I mentioned, you need to have an understanding of security to really first secure your website. And most of us, we are so busy running our businesses that we don't have that mind space or desire to understand security from first principles. So by working with an expert, you make sure that you're covered first. You are covering the bases upfront, but also when things go wrong, you have somebody who can handle that situation. So we are big fans of working with professionals on security.
Absolutely. Miriam, would you like to quickly add on to this conversation?
Sure. So before I founded Stratic, I had an agency as well, and I would kind of laugh but also cry about the fact that I got into it to build WordPress websites, and then I also had to learn about servers and also about security, and I became a semi-expert in all of those things. So I think at a certain point, in any case, should be worth an agency on a WordPress site. There's so much more that goes into it, in addition to security. And a business is not a WordPress expert. So generally, this is just my experience. Also, having an agency and also with Stratic, and of course now with Elementor, a lot of people rely on their agency partners. You can even call them partners to keep their site up and running and doing what they needed to do. And usually, or in many cases, and you should look into it, the agency themselves will have a certain level of security expertise. And that's usually enough for most businesses, unless you're like fintech or like a bank, like Mario mentioned, or then in that case you can work with Mario's agency. But those types of businesses that are have compliance and all sorts of regulations around them. Okay, yeah, definitely work with security professionals, and you'll probably have them in-house. But to a certain level of business can probably rely pretty well on the agency that they probably or should be working with, and then they don't have to become security experts themselves.
Perfect. Thank you, Miriam. And it's no coincidence that you all are, agreeing with each other's points, because you all have such great experience with WordPress security and more or less the same experience working in WordPress, obviously, and going through the same cycle as everyone else, as every other WordPress expert. So, Kathy, lastly, do you have anything else to add on in-house security or outsourcing it?
Yeah, well, so A lot of hackers expect smaller businesses to not have, a security operations center watching every single request to a website. So they tend to think that it's an easier in. So a growing business should definitely leverage expertise. The thing is, people like Mario, like myself, like Miriam and Akshat, we've seen stuff, we've seen some things. And so something that might not seem like, oh, well, that's just always been that way, that I've always had a backup in the root of my site that's freely accessible and it's never gotten hacked. We might take a look at that and say that's a serious problem. That is a discoverable file that has your WP config file in it with the password to your database. We might see that so much faster just because we've seen so many different things. We might see malware that you might not see. So just because we've seen so much and we've seen various patterns that hackers have left behind when they have intruded on a site. So leveraging that expertise is just going to shortcut your learning. It's going to shortcut the expertise that you could put in place in order to clean up a file, to prevent a vulnerability, to put some protections in place so that intrusion doesn't happen, so that backup file gets removed before a hacker discovers it, for example. So I would leverage expertise, especially when you're dealing with something that's so important, and especially at this time as we're getting ready for Black Hat. We're getting ready for Black Friday. We're getting ready for all of those sales to come in. The last thing you want to have happen is an intrusion in the midst of that or right before it that can affect sales.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Kathy. So I think what we can take away from this question is that outsource your security to the ones who are experts, and obviously trust them with your website, because you always won't have time to, keep an eye on hackers and vulnerabilities. So I think with that, we are moving on to the next part of this session. We still have a few minutes and we can take questions from our audience. So I'm just going to pin this question on the screen. It's a bit lengthy though. Let me see. Yeah. So it says that in light of increasing number of data breaches, can you share an example of a particular innovative or effective security solution your company has implemented to safeguard web applications in user data on website? I think Mario, if you can briefly, if you have, I mean, if you can briefly, explain or answer this question.
That's a good question, and I'm actually going to mention the chat once again, just because I love the audience, very engaging, very active. So maybe to Samantha that brought this up. Yeah, most of the hacking is not about data; it's about your server resources. So I just want to double down on that. Like, lots of people are worried about their data and, like, someone stealing their password or something like that, right? Unless you're using the very same password across every single site, you shouldn't be really worried about that. Not to mention that it's hashed, and, like, yes, people can reverse engineer it with rainbow tables and other ways, but right, it's probably not as mission critical as you think it is. But most of the hacking is actually about server resource, and actually what may happen is people running crypto miners or spam networks or some other activities ran on your server that are a lot more concerning for you, or like a Chinese spyware or something like that. So I just want to kind of pass the attention of, like, what are you worried about when it comes to security, and what may actually happen in terms of security. And in case of a breach, even if your website is not running very sensitive data, your server resource may be used for something that's a lot more critical in the grand scheme of things, including some cyber war operations and things like that. So with that in mind, for particularly innovative solutions to show, I would break it down into two separate sections. One of them is, again, detection. One of them is prevention. In terms of detection, for the most part, there are some of the off-the-shelf plugins, including Blogvault and malware solutions and WordPress and so forth. They're capturing some of these, like brute force attempts or like XSSs or SQL injections. Some of them may actually be captured, right? Cloudflare is reporting, hey, you got 97% DDoS attacks or so happening on your end, right? But when it comes to actual prevention systems or actually cleanup systems afterwards, then it gets a bit more clumsy, right? Cleaning up vulnerabilities and cleaning up actual hacks is tedious and it's hard, and in some cases it's really better to start all fresh. I've seen a number of issues where malware has been present for 6+ months and being inactive and then kicking in right after. So anything that you think, hey, I have 30 days backward, back in time, or I can restore to a previous version of the database or so, this is no longer legit, right? Your site has been infected for 6 months straight. So how you tackle that onward is usually a complex operation, and you need to figure out how it happens. So I wouldn't mention a specific solution. I'd say think about what sort of resources or data you're trying to preserve, and think about what sort of monitoring software exists. But when it happens, because more often than not, it's not if, it's when it happens, what can you do with your system and your storage in order to bring you to a better place, so to speak?
Perfect. Thank you. So this question was from Fernando. I hope you got your answer. Moving on to our next question, we have it's from Rachel, and she asked, "How important is security on a WordPress site if it is essentially a landing page with links that directs to other pages for purchasing digital products?" I think Akshat, if you can take this question.
Yeah, it is as important as, you are as vulnerable as a WooCommerce site which is making millions of dollars. At least that's and something which I repeated earlier also. So don't think that just because it's a landing page which looks simple, Thrivecart is actually a very is a complex application. Even a simple landing page you are making with bunch of plugins. You might be using a page builder, you might be using a form plugin and stuff like that. It might be as simple as that, but all of those things add vulnerability and add make your site vulnerable. So you have to uptake. In my opinion, you should be protecting it the best you can, and don't take it lightly just because it appears simple on the surface.
Thank you, Akshat, for that question. I think the last question over here we're going to take, it's I think everyone on this panel can pitch into this question, which is from Taha, and he asks, "Are there any emerging trends or new security challenges in the WordPress ecosystem that website owners should be aware about?" I think, Kathy, if you can start off very briefly answer this question.
New everything old is new again. It tends to be, just watching your plugins and watching vulnerabilities as they're getting patched, making sure that you have a firewall, making sure that you're using a two-factor authentication plugin to make sure that if your password is ever discovered in a breach, or you've or even a user that is on your site that has used a password that is also has been exposed in a breach and exposes your site, you want to make sure that all of your users are using two-factor authentication, even if they're just, like a store manager. If they have access to the site and can log in and authenticate, those types of things can be chained into more sophisticated types of attacks. So just protecting the basics, right? Making sure that everything's updated, you've got a firewall, that your login authentication is secured. And, I think right now, especially, is like a really good time to do a security audit to prepare for Black Friday, to just make sure, double check all of the things that just seem like that's the way that it's always been, or things that you might not be able to see, but that a security expert could, just so that you are prepared for the onslaught of orders, right? Rather than onslaught of hackers. So, it seems to be like the same types of thing. The other thing that I would really have people watch to use is passkeys, using WebAuthn. This is a new methodology of authentication that is starting to roll into WordPress, and into other authentication systems as well. That's going to protect us from phishing, going to protect us from being brute forced. Passkeys and WebAuthn is a new technology that is really going to change how we authenticate to systems online. And so, watch out for that. I've got some videos on YouTube that can show you what passkeys are all about. This is the latest and the greatest. But for WordPress, it's just, everything, all of the threats that are pretty much similar. They're trying to target the same types of vulnerabilities that have been around for a while.
Thank you, Kathy. Now, since you mentioned audit, there is a question, in fact, on the chat regarding audit, but obviously you don't have time to take it. If you can stay back and reply it on the chat yourself, I think that would be great. Miriam, do you want to add anything on the ecosystem and new security challenges that people might be aware of?
Sure. So it's not necessarily new, but it's relatively new to me. I've learned more about the world of third-party sellers that are selling themes and plugins that usually need a license, except for they're selling them without a license. Now, we're in the world of WordPress, so everything is GPL. So theoretically, if there's a plugin out there that's a version where there's a paid license, that doesn't matter. You can take it and you can redistribute it, and that is totally fine. The problem is that those types of plugins will then potentially have some kind of security issue, because that's just how things go. It's not like Akshat said earlier, it doesn't matter if it's free or pro, there's going to be something that needs fixing. And if you don't have a proper license, then you will not get that update. You may even purchase this theme bundle plugin thing, and it already has outdated versions of things in it, and you're starting from a point where you're vulnerable out of the gate. So I highly recommend purchasing or downloading. Download from the WordPress plugin repository or the theme repository. That's pretty reliable. Make sure you're working with reliable sellers, authorized sellers. Then you're probably going to be starting from a pretty good security posture, because they will be making sure that that's happening. Yes, it will cost more, but again, we're talking about in the world of WordPress. I mean, how much more? I'm not belittling costs, yeah, but in the end, you're going to pay for it in a different way. So make sure you're working with authorized sellers, and pay the few extra bucks to make sure that you will get those updates as they come out, so that you're safe and secure.
Thank you, Miriam. I think that's shrewd advice. If you do the basics right, I think that covers like 70% of web security for any website for that matter. Akshat, finally, I'm giving you the stage for this question. If you have anything to add on new security challenges or trends that people should know about.
No, so like Kathy said, everything old is new again. So there's very little new things that happen. But what we have done, in very recent past is we have gone through every single major vulnerability that has happened in the past 5 years. And we are seeing some very clear patterns emerging. People try to exploit very very specific things. So plugins make the same mistake again and again. They try and plug into the same parts of WordPress again and again. So the pattern is so clear. Small plugins, big plugins, they all make these mistakes again and again. And what this has meant is, actually, if you approach it in a smart manner, you can solve security in a manner which has not been done before, and in a manner which is very specific to WordPress. And I'll just pitch in a bit here. So this is something which we have been working on for years now, and finally we are actually about to roll out something called atomic security, which looks into this trend and prevents sites from getting hacked even before the vulnerabilities are discovered. So again, by reviewing and understanding this, all of this data that has existed and these patterns to emerge, I think security can be improved just by using technology.
Perfect. Thank you, Akshay, so much for that answer. And with that, I think we are on time to conclude this expert panel on web security. I want to thank all the panelists over here, Kathy, Mario, Akshat, and Miriam for being here today and doing this session with us. It's an honor to have you all in the same session, let alone in different sessions. So thank you so much for taking your time out and doing this session with us. Thank you, Oliver, for co-hosting this session with me. And I want to thank everyone who has been listening to this session and leaving out their questions. I'm sorry if I hadn't been able to take your question. These people will hang around and will try to answer your questions in the chat. Obviously, we still have a lot more activities planned for you in just a few moments. Obviously, I would request you to don't go away, because we have some amazing activities planned for you right here on the stage. The first one is the website audit challenge. Obviously, that will be happening on the stage. You can see on your screen that that will be happening on the stage in a few minutes. And then obviously we have a one-on-one consultation session with NitroPack that will be happening in room 1. So anyone who wants to get website consultation regarding performance from experts from NitroPack, they should head over to rooms. Obviously, they will be redirected to the room that the session is happening in. If you want to stay back for the website audit challenge, you can do that as well. You can win amazing prizes if you complete that challenge. So With that, I would like to conclude this session. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Oliver, and thank you, everyone who has been here in this session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was great.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank